Welcome to Hockey Nights in Vegas, episode 53, brought to you as always by the Las Vegas Advisor, www.lasvegasadvisor.com, your home for everything Las Vegas, and also brought to you by Ageless Forever, www.agelessforever.net. My very good friend, Dr. John Pierce's medical practice here in Las Vegas that will do everything and anything needed to get you to be the best you. I am joined for this episode by my good friend Chris Chapman from Fox Sports Vegas. We both have our celebratory shirts. Chap is in avocados, and I'm in a variety of cocktails. And unless you live under a rock or don't have TV in your prison, you would know that the Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup on Tuesday night. They defeated the Florida Panthers 9-3. and 4-1. They made a profit out of owner Bill Foley, who many, many years ago said playoffs in 3, cup in 6, that's the standard. And lo and behold, in year 6, by God, the Stanley Cup has its residency, much like many DJs, has its residency in Las Vegas for the next year. Chris and I were both honored and blessed to be in the building with 19,058 other screaming, yelling, maniacal fans. And it was a fantastic night. It was a fantastic series. It went the way our predictions pretty well expected it could be. I think Chap had 5. I had 6 games. But in spectacular fashion, the Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup in the Fortress in front of our fans. Chap, we just got back from Media Day. We got to talk to head coach Bruce Cassidy, general manager Kelly McCrimmon, president of hockey operations George McPhee, and owner Bill Foley. I thought for the first time this year, they just kind of let it fly. I mean, they were making jokes, and they were loose as a goose, as if they had been partying for 2 straight days after winning the Stanley Cup. What was your big takeaway from today's media?
Well, Bruce has always been pretty, I can't think of the word. He's always been pretty friendly and outgoing with us. So today was even more so, I thought, than normal. Kelly McCrimmon, lots of jokes. George McPhee, still serious as all can be. Like, I think he's already thinking about winning the cup next year. And Bill Foley, obviously, in a great mood. One of the takeaways that I had is we have no idea who the goalie of this team is going to be next year. Like, we legitimately have zero clue. Like, we don't know how close Robin Lehner is. We don't know if the plan is to re-sign one of Aiden Hill or Ambrosois or both. We don't know if it's going to be Logan Thompson's show. Like some guys asked, we got no inclination as to what the direction the team is going to go next year in goal. But I think all of that aside, I think, as you mentioned, these guys are all in really good moods. It was nice to see Kelly joking with us a little bit. George, very dry sense of humor, but some jokes. And, of course, Bruce and Bill, I mean, I don't know who's happier between the two of them. A little bit of vindication for Bruce Cassidy, and I'd say a little bit of celebration by Bill Foley because, hey, he can now tell the world, you know what? I made that prediction, and I wasn't BSing you when I made it. I was dead serious when I said cup in 6, and here they are. They've won the cup now in 6 years.
Well, I think my first takeaway was Bruce looked like he'd been out partying.
Well, he said, yeah.
Bruce, who's normally very polished and very sort of spot on, and I'm not going to assume anything. I don't know if the man had a couple of pops, but the man was suffering certainly from a lack of sleep, and
he
said that. He was as good as he's ever been, but in a much lighter mood. He still gave us the answers. He's still like we've got all year from him. We get substance when we ask him a question. He doesn't duck anything. He's willing to go deep into the process and really sort of tell us what's going on in his head and with his team. This was the first time that I had ever seen Kelly McCrimmon sort of loosened up. I mean, he gave the business to Steve Karp a little bit. He lit up Ben Goetz for a poor choice in wearing a Minnesota shirt, which is it's a terrible choice. I'm a Michigan man. Kelly's a Michigan man. So Minnesota, that doesn't even rank.
Not
George. George made the comment. He was like, "Hey, I don't want to compare this to the underworld, but we're made men."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Huh?" Right out of the box, we're getting mafia. We're getting mafia stuff.
He made light of it twice. He twice made men. So
and that was fantastic.
The comment at the end about this is probably the happiest press conference we're ever going to have together. I thought I got a really good kick out of that too, because we've dealt with George now for 6 years, and he's very dry and deliberate with his jokes, and they tend to be. You kind of have to be paying attention, to get them. And I've always found them to be a little humorous, but I've always been a fan of that Monty Python type of humor where you can't be a dummy and watch it and understand it. So like the joke at the end by George, I just thought it was classic George. Like, you know what, guys? Yeah, it's great we won this, but this is probably the happiest we're ever going to be when all of us are in a room together. So,
and it was the Bill Foley victory lap. And it was really nice. It was really nice to see, I don't know how much bravado went into making that prediction 6 years ago. I don't know if he knew enough to make something like that, or if he just wanted to, stir the pot a little bit. But he certainly has empowered the management team to do everything in their power to get him there. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, they got him there.
Well, we heard it right? with Kelly, and I think it was Kelly, may have been George, who made the comment that every time they wanted to do something, Foley was involved, but at the end of the day, he was the one. I apologize for that. He was the one who he got out of the way and he let them do their thing, and I think that's a good owner, right? Like a good owner has input, but he gets out of the way and he lets the hockey people or the baseball people or the football people make the tough decisions, because that's what he's paying them for. Like, he's not the kind of guy who thinks he knows more than George and Kelly, and he got out of the way when he needed to get out of the way. And I think that's a big part of why this team is a Stanley Cup champ.
Next up, it was my first time. Chris, it was your second time, but normally, just so we can pull the curtain aside for the viewers, normally after the games, we go down, we stand in a hallway, and then we get led like cattle into the dressing room. We get a couple of players, maybe 3. Mm-hmm. We go to a different room and we get Coach Cassidy, and then we go home. Well, the NHL a few years ago implemented sort of a different system, and it allowed us to watch the final few seconds from the press box, but then go downstairs. And it was honestly, in my 59 years on this earth, one of the most unbelievable experiences to walk out on the ice with the players and their families and the executives and the scouts, and everybody was on the ice, and the cup was being passed around. Like, okay, I better not make that reference. But anyway, the cup was being passed around and chaperoned by Mark Stone, and the players were all over the ice. And it was, to me, and this is more fan than podcast host, it was just the most surreal, unbelievable environment. I mean, you literally could just walk up to anybody and talk to them. You could walk up to people who you didn't know, and everybody was congratulating everybody else. And my biggest takeaway from that hour or hour and a half that we got to spend on the ice was the wives and the kids seeing Mark Stone holding up his baby, seeing William Karlsson put his baby in the cup, seeing Riley Smith and his basically newborn. And a lot of times the players are pretty robotic with us, and they sort of give us stock answers and things like that. But that completely went away. It was just unbelievable. And they recognize all of us, and they know that we're still in the media and we do what we have to do. But throughout this episode, we'll be putting up some pictures that we took that were on the ice that will give you a perspective that really nobody else in the world could have. And to me, that was the coolest thing about the entire time, was just getting to watch them celebrate with their families and their friends. And that, to me, was absolutely the coolest thing about my time on the ice.
Yeah, it was my second experience with this. And the first time I was in the loser's locker room. And quite frankly, it sucked. To see guys crying, knowing that they had come so far and they had been so close, only to come up short. It sucked, because that first year, I think the relationships that I built with a lot of those guys, a lot of them are no longer here, but you really felt for those guys, because it was the most storybook of storybook writings that you could have had. And then it ended in tragedy. It was almost like Shakespeare, right? Like, he was so deranged and cruel that everything was going along great and fine. And you get to this high, and then all of a sudden you fall off a cliff. So the NHL doesn't allow the media in the winning team locker room. So we weren't in there with the Capitals, and I wouldn't have gone anyway. But going out on the ice and seeing guys that we had talked to for 9 months, some cases 6 years, and being able to experience that with them, like we're kind of in a bit of an interesting spot, because the average fan, unless they happen to be at one of the nightclubs, didn't have the opportunity to celebrate with the players. They celebrated from the stands, they celebrated in Toshiba Plaza, but excuse me, they didn't have the opportunity to celebrate with the fans, high five them, give them hugs. Well, we didn't get to go to the after party, but we were down on the ice with them. And, I consider myself to be media, but I'm not like held to a high standard like the writers are. I work for the flagship station. I produce the daily Golden Knights show. So I'm kind of in between, like, real serious journalist and
me.
Yeah. So I high five guys. I'm not going to lie, right? Like, you see Paul Cotter, and I couldn't have been more happy for him. You're down there on the ice. He's with his mom, who is a sweet lady, and he introduces me to his brother. His brother is a super nice kid, and in that moment, Paul is celebrating getting, like, think about it. This is a kid who he's going to get his name on the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
Like, and in that moment, he's telling me how good of a player his brother is. Like, not, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. It's, my brother's a great player. High-fiving Braden McNabb, who I've known for 6 years and was one of the first. McNabb was one of the first players introduced. He was one of the first guys in Vegas. They did the expansion draft. They bring out Marc-Andre Fleury, Derek England, Jason Garrison, and then Braden McNabb. And I asked Braden, and it was incredible, because I asked him I had the date. It was June 22nd of 2017. They bring you to T-Mobile Arena to be in the shop. And, I don't know if he's a single guy at that time. Like, he obviously didn't have kids. Like, I don't know if his girlfriend now or his wife now is the girlfriend he had in LA. I don't know any of that. But they bring him here to shop for clothes and, pictures and in the Armory or whatever the one is at the arena. Right? Like, City National wasn't even completed yet.
Right.
And I asked him if he ever could have imagined that first day, if he could have envisioned this. And his comment to me was, well, I was just trying to make the team. Like, my concern was just making the team. Like, this was a guy who didn't even know if he was going to be on the roster. And he was healthy scratched a few of those first games. But basically, when they put him in that lineup, whether it was game 10 of that first year, the only way he's ever come out is through injury. And it hasn't been too many of those. So, like, to be able to celebrate with him and knowing that he went through that heartbreak in San Jose, and William Carrier and talking to him. And, you know, I talked to his dad. I talked to Will Carrier's dad. And I know Carrier was someone who Joe was fond of, and for off the ice reasons. And, you know, I talked to his dad and I asked him about fishing. And his dad said, I said, oh, Will loves to talk about fishing. I said, did you teach him everything he knows? And he goes, yeah, I did. But now he's teaching me things. So to be able to meet the players' families and talk to them a little bit, that was really cool as well.
Okay, well, that's 15 minutes of pom-pom waving. Let's get to the hockey part of things, I think. They utterly dominated Florida. We thought that they were probably the better team going in. There was a certain sort of sense that Florida might have been a team of destiny after eliminating Boston and then Toronto and then Carolina. And the pundits were pretty much pushing on Florida that this was just their year. Everything was going right. Looking back now, we've had a couple of days since the win. Are you surprised how utterly dominant the Golden Knights were? And do you think that that's possibly because they didn't play any game sevens? The entire playoffs, they probably weren't in an enormously high stress situation other than 2-2 against Edmonton. And how much of it do you attribute to maybe the road was a little bit, maybe, I guess easier is the right way. Their path, the Golden Knights' path, they put themselves on a much easier track to the Stanley Cup Finals than what Florida did.
Well, that's what happens when you're the number one seed as opposed to the 8th seed, right? And I am surprised that the Golden Knights won a game. What was it, 7-2, and then obviously 9-3 in the closeout game. Like, that surprised me. I'm not surprised the Golden Knights 1-5. I mean, that was my prediction, but I was a bit surprised with how easily they won this series. Like, Sasha Barkov was a non-factor. Sam Bennett was a non-factor. Sergei Bobrovsky, outside of maybe game 3, was a non-factor. I think for the Golden Knights, the road was certainly easier, but it was also the fact that, look, I mean, Florida swept the Carolina Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Finals. But for the Golden Knights, outside of the Edmonton series, they didn't have any series where it was physical, right? Like the Dallas series, you had the cheap shot by Jamie Benn.
Yeah, that stuff.
Domi throwing some cheap shots, but it wasn't as nasty as the Edmonton series. And Carolina or Florida had to go through a couple extra games. No game 7s for the Golden Knights. Even the Dallas series when they were up 3-0, even though I started to panic a little bit when they lost those 2 games, you know, there just wasn't anything that was taxing. And the other aspect of it was, outside of Laurent Brossoit getting injured, the Golden Knights didn't have to deal with any injury adversity throughout these playoffs. Sure, Braden McNabb got banged up in the Winnipeg series, but you could tell as the playoffs went on, he healed. They only missed 3 games on the blue line the entire series. You had Ben Hutton and Braden Pahal play in the Winnipeg series. And then Pietrangelo was suspended for game 6 against Edmonton?
5.
So, like, you really didn't have too much to deal with on the injury front. I mean, we heard Paul Maurice, and I always wonder, like, and I understand you don't hear these things during the playoffs, right? Like Bruce Cassidy was never going to say, "Hey, Brandon McNabb was dealing with a mid-body injury," but you hear after, like Aaron Ekblad, I think he broke his foot in the Boston series. You had someone else on the Panthers who was playing with a pretty nasty injury. You had Kachuk, who has the cracked sternum. Like, I don't know if you break a sternum, but you could certainly crack it. He was playing with that injury. I think he suffered it in game 3. I think Kolasar actually was the one who delivered the hit.
The 55 train did that, yes.
Yeah. So get the hell out. Note to everyone else next year, get the hell out of that guy's way.
Yep.
So, you know, I think the lack of injuries certainly helped, but the Golden Knights were just a better team. I think a lot of us felt that Florida, look, at the end of the day, had Pittsburgh not lost to Chicago and Columbus,
right,
Florida doesn't even make the playoffs. And I know they got hot at the right time, and it was a great story the way they came back to beat the Bruins. But look, that President's Trophy and having the most points in the league and having X amount of victories, none of that means anything in the playoffs, as we've seen many, many times. So it's not shocking how easily the series went, but it is shocking at how dominating the Golden Knights were.
I think that my biggest thought, the all arching over encompassing thought was, after going to all the games in the series, including the 2 games in Florida, I never felt like the Golden Knights were in peril. You know what I mean? I mean, they lost game 3, but game 3, aside from the first 2 periods of game 5, game 3 was arguably their best game of the series. They gave up a late goal, 6-on-5, and they lost in overtime. But I left the rink thinking, okay, it's 2-1, but the Golden Knights are not in jeopardy at all of losing this series. And I never for 1 second felt like this is going to be much of anything, really. It was just sort of, when are they going to get it done? Florida had no answer for the Golden Knights forecheck, had no ability to get to the center of the ice to score goals. And I just thought that was the most shocking part of the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My stupid Siri decided to pop on there, so I didn't quite catch everything you said. But, you know, I'm with you in that I don't think I ever felt for one moment that they were in jeopardy. And really, quite frankly, the only series I think I ever did, even though I got a little panicky with the Dallas series, the only series I really felt that they could lose was Edmonton. They were going to beat Winnipeg because they were so much better than the Jets. And the only chance the Jets had in that series was Connor Hellebuck stealing 4 games.
4 games, right.
And that wasn't going to happen. They won game 1, but after that, it was academic. You know, the one game where Winnipeg, what were they down 3 goals in the third period and came back and won, but like, or lost that game in overtime. Was that double overtime game, I think? But there was never a doubt.
Right.
Like, even after Florida scores that first goal of the series, a shorthanded goal, I mean, there was just never a moment where you're like, yeah, these guys are in trouble. And I think it came from the fact that there was just a level of confidence in this team, but it wasn't arrogance. And I think that's a major thing. And the depth of the team certainly gave you reason to believe. Like, you look at Florida's depth, and it certainly wasn't anywhere near what the Golden Knights were. Like, maybe Matthew Tkachuk and Sasha Barkov, they were probably the 2 best players in the series, but they were non-factors because the Golden Knights were just suffocating. And that goes to the job that Jack Eichel and William Karlsson did defensively.
And Florida had to play Sasha Barkov and had to play Tkachuk 24, 25, 26 minutes a game, because anytime they put their third and the fourth line out, they were just, it was like a cat playing with a mouse. It was just complete and utter domination. I think that there were 3 key moments in the series that were the absolute sort of bellwethers for the result. The first one was the paddle save. It was eerily reminiscent of Braden Holtby on Alex Tuck in year one, but
same net too.
I always want to say Robin Cousins or Kirk Cousins, but it's the other Cousins, Nick, who used to be with the Golden Knights. If that goal goes in, the tenacity, the belief in Florida probably goes up quite a bit. My second key was when Tkachuk flattened Jack Eichel, and Jack was in bad shape. But like he said after the game, he said, I went back, calmed myself a little bit, got the ship right. When he came back and he was on the bench in the third period after a tremendous, and let me say this, clean hit, that was huge for the Golden Knights psyche, because at the time, and as it turned out through the playoffs, he was their leading scorer. And the fact that what must have been going through his head with his neck, and for him to shake it off and say, okay, I'm all right. And he come back out. And the next thing you know, his like first shift in the third period, he feeds an apple to Marchessault, and Marchessault finishes, and everything seemed right in the world. Mm-hmm. And the third we discussed just briefly was Keegan Colasar absolutely blowing up Tkachuk. Absolutely. Again, a perfectly clean hit, right? But that was the last gasp at all for Florida. When he was, I mean, listen, the man played with a broken sternum for the rest of game 3 and game 4. And the story is that his brother had to dress him and he couldn't get out of bed, and the players helped him and tied his skates. And listen, I got no beef with him. He's an agitator and a disturber, but he's a top 10 player in the NHL. And when he was not anywhere near 100%, and we weren't sure why until after game 5, he was their only hope on the offensive end. Like you said, Barkov, Bennett, and Reinhart all should have been on milk cartons because they clearly they had disappeared. And so those 3 moments, I think, were sort of the, if you planted your flag on the 3 big events that led to the Golden Knights victory, I think those were the 3 in the series.
Yeah, I'll add the Barbashev hit on Radko Gudas.
Oh yeah,
that's a good one. Because I think, first of all, you knocked Gudas out of the game. He didn't play after that in game 1. But Gudas has a reputation for being a really tough, hard-nosed, just kind of he's a man's player. And the Barbashev hit that basically I think it sent the message like, hey, you know what? We know what your reputation is. Not Radko Gudas, but the Panthers. We know how you've gotten here. We just want you to know that we can dish it out as well when we need to. I thought that was really one of those moments where you look back and maybe it doesn't register right away, but for me, that was one of those early tone-setting moments, and it came from Ivan Barbashev. I thought Zach Whitecloud scoring of the winning goal in game 1 was also pretty significant because Zach is a guy who has a little offense in his game, but it just goes back to that notion that the depth of this team was so much better than Florida's that your third pairing defenseman, who's probably the 6th choice, is out there scoring game-winning goals in the Stanley Cup final. So it wasn't so much that it was Zach. It was that every single time this team needed someone, it didn't have to be a superstar player to step up and make the big play. It was anybody on that team. And I think
it was everybody on that team.
Yeah. I mean, they got goals from every player who skated, well, outside of Pahal and I don't think Hutton scored. But every player who was a regular player in the lineup, with the one exception of Brandon McNabb, scored a goal for them in the postseason.
Yep.
They had no 30-goal scorers in the regular season. They had 4 guys score 10 goals or more in the playoffs. Chandler Stevenson, Mark Stone, William Karlsson, Jonathan Marchessault. I mean, William Karlsson ended up with what, 11 goals in the postseason? And he only scored 14 in the regular season. The depth up and down the lineup of this team, and with Whitecloud scoring that goal, it continued the trend of what we had seen all season. And then this is not a moment particularly. It's the course of moments over the 5 games. The penalty killed the Golden Knights. They were perfect. They did not allow one power play goal the entire series. That to me,
they scored on the power play.
They scored shorthanded goals. So
who are these Golden Knights? Who are these Golden Knights, and where did they come from?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Because outside of the Edmonton series, I thought overall the penalty kill was much better than they were in the regular season, and maybe that comes from having Mark Stone back in the lineup. But I mean, Eddie, this was not something that I expected that the Golden Knights would put.
How could you
zeros on the board or that the Panthers would put zeros on the board on the power play?
I think, I mean, that was just, I mean, they were 0 for 14 and the power play was 6 for 19, I think.
Yeah.
They had been cruising around at 19-20% all year. And now they're hanging a 33 kind of number on them. I think the big change on the PK was after game 2 against Edmonton. They were super passive in the PK, and they were getting, I think Edmonton might have been 5 for their first 9, something like that.
And then they got super aggressive.
They got super aggressive, pressuring the puck out high, especially not giving the D-men on Edmonton's power play the time and space to make the moves down low to Draisaitl on the half wall.
Bouchard to basically be a quarterback with a clean pocket.
Right. And that, to me, when they made that change, their confidence went up. And they had a couple of little bumps. Dallas got a little bit against them. But you could see that their headspace was, we can kill penalties.
And for a team that doesn't take a lot of penalties.
Yeah, just, and it's infectious. When the PK is working, and it's the same infectious when the power play all of a sudden starts scoring.
Yeah.
They're like, wait a second. If we draw penalties, we're going to put up some shots and we have a reasonable opportunity to really flex on people by scoring goals. And, that's completely unexpected I think to both of us, because when we did the last episode, we were talking about who has the advantage here, who has the advantage there. And we both indicated that the Florida Panthers had a significant advantage on both special teams, and exactly the opposite turned out to be in the finals. I just, that to me is the most shocking part of the game within the game, is how utterly dominant they were on both sides of the special teams. So I have a multiple choice question for you, Mr. Chapman.
Okay, let's rock.
Okay, normally you get like A, B, and C. You get to pick from in a multiple choice, but this one is C, D, and E. What was the key to the Golden Knights winning the Stanley Cup? Answer C, composure, evidenced by the Jamie Benn and people punching Nick Hague in the face and them not getting caught up in other teams' bullshit trying to draw them into penalties. D, depth. The fact that Bruce Cassidy literally just had to push the start button and roll the lines and roll the D pairs. And the depth, obviously, in goal, the fact that Aiden Hill was 11-4 with a mid-2s and a .930 save percentage, and he didn't even play in the first round. Or E, experience. The fact that the Petrangelos of the world and the Barbashevs, and to an extent the Phil Kessels and the Alec Martinez, and though he didn't play, Jonathan Quick, the fact that they had so many cups and so much elder statesman experience to help the new guys get through the final steps of the process. Is there one of those you think that was the absolute key to winning the Stanley Cup? Or F, all of the above?
Well, I would go F, all of the above. And I want to add to the experience because it's not just the guys who had been there and won before. It's that this franchise has played so many playoff games since its inception that the Jonathan Marchessaults, the Mark Stones, the William Carlsons, the Braden McNabbs, the Shea Theodores, they were all part of, maybe not Stone, not that first run, but Stone was part of that team that had a game stolen from them, a series stolen from them against San Jose. They had the they had the
Okay, I found.
What Siri you want now?
Oh my God, stupid Siri keeps popping up. They had the experience against Montreal, against Dallas in the bubble. Like this team, not just the cup winning guys, but everybody who's a part of this organization, with the exception of a few guys, has been on teams that have made deep runs in the playoffs. And I think the always coming up short aspect, whether it was short against the Sharks, short against Dallas, short against the Capitals, short against the Canadiens, having all those injuries last year and missing the playoffs entirely. Like, I think the experience of that drove this team to where when they got to this point, they were like, fuck this shit. We are not going home. We're doing this on our terms. And I think that Marchessault, you saw it, right? Conn Smythe winner. Jonathan Marchessault, undrafted guy, bounced around the AHL, bounced around a couple teams in the NHL. William Karlsson, fourth line guy in Columbus. We don't need you. Go. Riley Smith, we're going to trade you to the Golden Knights so they will take Jonathan Marchessault. And I think it was those guys saying, you know what? Fuck this. We're doing it our way, right? Frank Sinatra song. I did it my way. Well, the Golden Knights, their experienced players were going to do it their way. And I know I've emphasized a lot on that. I do think it's all the above, but I wanted to add that to the experience aspect.
I think it's definitely F, but I would lean toward D for depth.
Yes.
Just the fact that it didn't matter when it was in the game. You would see if there was 3 minutes to go and they were up a goal, you would see Whitecloud and Haig on the ice. You would see Carrier, Waugh, and the fourth, and Colasar, the fourth line on the ice. The fact that the culture that Bruce Cassidy created and the system that Bruce Cassidy created and the players that were provided to Bruce Cassidy by Kelly McCrimmon and by George McPhee set them up in a way that they were absolutely unbeatable. Bruce Cassidy has utter confidence in whoever he puts over the boards at any time. And the key statement to sort of back that up was going into game 6. He said, listen, boys, we're not going to match lines tonight. Beat the guy in front of you.
Yeah.
That's it. Beat the guy in front of you. And the fact that all of the teaching and all of the things that Bruce Cassidy brought to the Golden Knights came to absolute fruition in that 63-day window of the Stanley Cup Finals is the most incredible thing. Ivan Barbashev is now the official winner of the trade line deals, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
I mean, Boston loaded up with Bertuzzi and Orlov, and the Rangers loaded up with Patty Kane and some other people. At the end of the day,
Timo Meier.
Right. At the end of the day, a fourth line guy, cup winner from St. Louis, the pro scouting staff identified as the perfect sort of Mr. Fix-It. And he, for his time during the regular season, played up and down the lineup, played right wing and left wing, and a little bit of center.
Yeah.
But then he found the chemistry, and he was going to be the hunter with Eichel and Marchessault. He was the disruptor. And I mean, my God, man, he didn't get any votes for the Conn Smythe, but the pickup of Ivan Barbashev is easily one of the significant keys to why the Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I don't know if you could say they don't win it without him, but I feel pretty confident saying that they don't win it without him. Because he allowed Jonathan Marchessault and Jack Eichel. Look, those guys finished 1-2 in Conn Smythe voting. Barbashev was on the line with those guys. So he wasn't a passenger on that line. He was a driver with those two.
He opened up all the ice. He opened up the entire scoring section for Eichel to push him back and Marchessault to finish.
And you mentioned the guys who, and I asked Kelly McCrimmon about that. And he went on, talked about how good he was. I thought he maybe exceeded expectations. Kelly said, no, he was the player that we thought he was. Maybe that was his way of saying, yeah, he was really fucking good.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that was a move that the Golden Knights made. It kind of went under the radar, right? We paid attention to it because we cover the team, but I don't know how much people in New York paid attention to it. How much people in Boston, maybe a little more in Boston, right? Because he was on the Blues team that beat them, but maybe people in Tampa or people in Edmonton, right? Edmonton's going out and they're trying to make a move for Erik Karlsson, right? And then Vegas goes and Ivan Barbashev. Like, I think in other markets, people were probably like, good player, not a difference maker. Well, guess what? Good player and a difference maker.
Big difference maker.
And my thing is now he needs to be re-signed. You absolutely have to. Now, Kelly wasn't tipping his cap, and that's what good GMs do, right? He's not going to let us know. I tried to get him.
You did?
But he didn't bite because he's really good at what he does. And he'd be a great poker player. And I think it's imperative. I think Ivan Barbashev should be target number one. You don't need to add anything, right? Like, you don't need to go out and you don't need to get Alex DeBrincat. You don't need to go out and get another superstar. You've got enough of those. Now you need to keep together what you've already won with, because the reality is the way this team played from the All-Star break on, there was nobody, and that includes you, Boston Bruins, that includes you, Edmonton Oilers. There's nobody who played better hockey the last 4 or 5 months of the season than the Golden Knights. And I don't think they're done. Like, I don't think this is a franchise. We heard Kelly, maybe it was George, it was Kelly, where he said, a lot of people thought maybe we were all in. No, we weren't all in.
No.
And I don't think this is one of those franchises that settles for one. Like, I don't think there's anybody in that front office high-fiving and patting themselves on the back and saying the job is done. I think the job is just beginning, because I think these guys, they're hungry. I think they want to win more. In order to do that, you need an Ivan Barbashev. I could not have been more wrong about Ivan Barbashev. I knew he was a good player, but I was like, he's a third, fourth line guy. Ivan Barbashev was so good for this team in so many different ways. And I think maybe all he needed was an opportunity to really show that. I mean, he's a cool guy. Like you talk to him,
so soft spoken,
but he's smooth. And when you talk to him, you're like, all right, when this guy, remember the terrible movie Over the Top with Sylvester Stallone?
Sure.
And he's talking about what a low-key, easygoing guy he is. But then I flipped the cap and I turned into a machine. Well, like, when Barbashev puts the helmet on, he goes from like mild-mannered, nice, friendly, outgoing guy, soft-spoken, to
the Hulk.
I use the term
angry
bastard.
Hulk. I
use the term a bastard.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like, I became such a big Ivan Barbashev fan when I watched him play every night. And I said, I love this guy. Like, I love watching him play because he's a prick, but he's a clean prick. Like, he's not dirty. The hit on Gudis, clean, totally clean.
Blew him up.
Yes. I mean, the guys knocked him up in the air off his skates. So, it's interesting. And I can't wait to see what they do in the offseason. Like, I'm ready for next season to start already.
Well, I that's a great conversation to have probably in the next episode. We're going to stay with the playoffs for this one. The next episode is going to come by pretty fast, and it's going to be the year in review plus the outlook. I mean, there are huge questions. They pushed Kelly around on Robin Leonard today, and they got nothing.
No,
So
he doesn't bite.
yeah, I mean, he knows that it's coming. It's like a good hitter. It's like, I know when the junk is coming, I'm just going to lay off it.
Well,
And,
you see him walk in. He walks in with his little notes, and
yeah,
I think maybe like I look at Kelly McCrimmon the way I look at one of those big catfish, and they don't get to be the big catfish in the pond or in the river by biting at the fishing line.
right.
Like those catfish, they don't last very long. Kelly McCrimmon is the big catfish in the river because he's not taking the bite. He's not biting at the little nibble or the worm. He's eating the little fish. And that's what this organization has done. He's eating the little fish. And I mean, the guy's good. I mean, you could love or hate him. And, there's times where I'm like, I can't believe he made this move. The guy fucking knows what he's doing. Like, and he's got clearly one of the best general managers in the league.
And like George said guts. But I mean, let's be honest. He had the balls to make the Eichel deal.
Yeah, right? And they talked about that.
I want to talk about an interesting word here. And the word is validation. If you look at the Golden Knights, you look at Bruce Cassidy, shipped off in Boston after making the playoffs for 6 years. You look at Jack Eichel. He was bad-mouthed. They said that he had a bad attitude, that he wasn't a winner, that he was nowhere near as good a player as Connor McDavid. Look at Jonathan Marchessault, like you said, cast off from the AHL, gotten rid of by Florida after scoring 30 goals. Riley Smith, the add-in to make sure that they took Jonathan Marchessault.
One of only 2 guys undrafted to win the Conn Smythe Trophy, by the way.
And the other was pretty famous, and he wore number 99 for Edmonton, in case you were curious to the answer to that trivia question. But my question to you is, and we asked Marchessault this, is there any validation or vindication in winning the cup and winning it against Florida? And he said it's water under the bridge. It was a long time ago. But I think that there is. Bruce Cassidy was an incredible gentleman about how he handled the Boston aspect of things. But I think secretly, privately, away from everything, he's so happy he jammed it up their ass. He's couldn't be happier. And Marchessault and Riley Smith, same thing. They got shipped unceremoniously from Florida. And Jack Eichel is the ultimate validation story. He was bad-mouthed. He was beat up. He's lackadaisical. He doesn't play every shift. And, why did the Golden Knights pick him up and all this other stuff? But what did Jack Eichel do? He didn't win the Conn Smythe Trophy. He got 5 first-place votes. But he led the National Hockey League in scoring in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He had more points than Marchessault, 6-20 versus 13-12. And I understand you gave it to you have to give it to Marchessault because, like in baseball, chicks dig the long ball. Goals are kind of an important thing. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if you had to say who was the best player on the Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup playoffs, my vote is Jack Eichel.
That's a tough one because there's a lot of different directions I could go there. But I think when you factor in the job Eichel did defensively, I
say that again. Jack Eichel defensively.
Yes. Like, I think that to me, like, you saw him back checking. You saw him doing things that he had been previously knocked for not doing. Like, he went all in. Jack Eichel bought in and he went all in. And I'm in agreement with you that from game 1 against Winnipeg,
which he was terrible.
Yes.
Terrible. -3 and terrible.
But he bounced back
Immediately.
right away. There was no, oh my God, the walls are caving in on me. It was, you know what? I got to go out and be better. And Jack Eichel was better. So from game 2 until game 22, I don't think there was a player better than Jack Eichel on the Golden Knights. Now, that's not to say that William Karlsson didn't have his moments. Pietrangelo didn't have his moments.
They pretty much all had their moments.
Yeah, but
But
the most consistent player throughout the playoffs of the Golden Knights was Jack Eichel.
And he's making a little bit less than Connor McDavid, but his jewelry box will be much bigger, brighter, shinier.
Yeah, he's going to have something in there that Jack doesn't have, or that Connor doesn't have.
That Connor doesn't have. And it really is, that's the redemption story to me of not only the playoffs, but the whole season. The Golden Knights didn't have a 70-point scorer, 66 points. But they had 7 or 8 guys that scored 15 goals. And in that 15-goal club, you have the Iron Man of the NHL who didn't even get in the playoffs.
Yeah.
You have Paul Cotter, a rookie making $750,000, never got a sniff of the playoffs, right?
What do you have,
Jack
16
Eichel,
goals?
What?
I think he had like 16 goals.
He had 15 or 16, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that the leading scorer of the Golden Knights had 66 points and had 26 points in 22 games in the Stanley Cup playoffs after coming with what others perceived as baggage. To me, the sky is now absolutely the limit for Jack Eichel. There's no reason that he can't be a 100-point guy.
Yeah, I think this is just the beginning.
Yeah, this is setting the table.
There's not a lot of guys where you look around the league and say the beginning of their becoming an elite player, and becoming a Hall of Fame caliber player is winning a Stanley Cup. Like, that doesn't generally happen, where a guy's first foray into the Stanley Cup playoffs turns into what Jack Eichel did in this rendition of the Stanley Cup playoffs. As you mentioned, he was so good, so consistent, and he's only going to get better. Like, once he gets the confidence to start shooting more on the power play, and he gets his little office, because his one-timer is pretty damn nasty.
Do you think that, I don't know that it's confidence. I think, honest to God, and we watched him all year.
He's a pass first guy. I think it's not, confidence isn't the right word. It's the shoot first mentality. Right. I think is probably a better way to put it, because what I've noticed with him, he's a distributor. He wants to help everyone else elevate their game. But I think it comes at a sacrifice in that he's a guy who could go out and score 50 goals, I think, if he wanted to, because the talent is there. So I'm going to be curious to see how he elevates his game even more. And I think it begins with shooting more on the power play, because once you open that up, it opens up a lot more for everyone else on the team, because right now teams aren't cognizant of that. If they have to be cognizant of it, it just makes Golden Knights power play one of the better ones in the league.
I'll go out on a limb. I'll make the first prediction for next season. Ready?
Yep.
35 goals, 70 assists for Jack Eichel.
Yeah, I can see it. I think he's a 100-point guy.
And the only way that he gets to in the neighborhood of 40, 45, 50 is if the Golden Knights get decimated up front and he needs to, ramp up the scoring. I think that he's perfectly happy. Like you said, I think he's perfectly happy giving all the glory to anybody else. And the ultimate validation for that is when they announced Marchessault as the Conn Smythe winner Eichel was the first person that hugged him. And I don't know if the audio is available out to the public, but we got a chance to hear it. Marchessault said to Eichel, "You got this for me."
Yeah.
You don't need, this doesn't need to be polished up by the two of us. The
No.
Conn Smythe winner told the guy who assisted on 8 or 9 of his 13 goals that he, Eichel, got the Conn Smythe trophy for Marchessault.
Mm-hmm.
That's an encyclopedia. That's a volume in and of itself, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap this up because Jack Eichel is going to be at the Canes in Summerlin in about an hour working the drive-through. So we're going to probably go and score some Canes chicken fingers because they're a big sponsor of the Golden Knights. Speaking of sponsors, we should always thank the Las Vegas Advisor at www.lasvegasadvisor.com and agelessforever.net. Dr. John Pierce, my very good friend and supporter of the Hockey Nights in Vegas podcast. That's it. The Golden Knights made a profit out of Bill Foley, profit with PROPH, not PROFIT. And they made a good profit for him too. If you saw the line at the Arsenal this morning, 200 some people still trying to buy gear, but I digress. So we'll wrap up the Stanley Cup analysis episode. Tomorrow night is going to be absolute mayhem here in Las Vegas. There is a parade on Las Vegas Boulevard leading to a rally in Toshiba Plaza. The festivities start at 7 o'clock at night, and you better come early because it's going to be a something. Hockey Nights in Vegas will be back pretty early next week. I think we're going to do a year-end awards show and combine it with a preview of free agency and the draft and buyouts. Folks, there isn't a lot of off time. The Golden Knights probably don't play again until September, but that doesn't mean that there won't be an awful lot of hockey business for us to talk about over the summer. So thank you all for watching and for subscribing. Thanks, Chris, for doing this. I'm looking forward to doing some great things together in the upcoming season. Congratulations to Bill Foley and to George McPhee, Kelly McCrimmon, all the players and their families and the staff on an incredible 2022-23 season, culminating with raising the hardest trophy in professional sports, the Stanley Cup, in front of our incredible fans here in Las Vegas. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks again, and we'll see you again soon. Have a great day.